positions in the state of Illinois, you might be surprised to know that there are, I think I need my glasses on. You'll be surprised to know that there are 8,529 units of government in the state of Illinois. You have 307 city governments. There's even a government called a drainage district. They have 858 of those. There is a fire protection district, 835 of those. Multi-township assessment districts, 320. 348 park districts, 365 library districts, 1,381 road and bridge districts, and on, making up that 8,500 units of government. So anybody interested in running for office, there's plenty in the state of Illinois to run for. You heard in the reading of my bio, and as I mentioned, you know, when I hear my bio read, what crosses my mind is that I need to go make select. Because there's no way, without Allah's help, that a poor boy out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and my wife don't like me using that, would have been able to serve in those various roles. There's just no way that would have happened. And so, in those roles, I've gained a lot of experience. And that experience is something that I have to share with you. That's my role, and I've always recognized that in every role I've played, as I mentioned. Politically speaking, one of the items, or one of the places where I served is called the SEIU Illinois Council. Now, many of you are familiar with SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. I know you are, Brother Akbar. We kind of interacted with each other at Malcolm X, because we represented members over there. But the Illinois Council of SEIU is the political arm of SEIU. That arm of SEIU is the arm that endorses candidates, do fundraising for candidates, put people on the ground to help elect these officials. I happen to serve on that board for a number of years, probably 20 years. And there are many political figures that come through that want to become elected officials in certain offices, and that board is the board that really made that possible for a number of them, and we can talk about some of those individuals. It was also mentioned that I served on the Illinois State Board of Investment, appointed by the former governor, Governor Quinn. The Illinois State Board of Investment is the agency or institution that governs and invests the pension funds for all of the state employees in the state of Illinois. That fund, when I left there, was a $15 billion fund. And it was growing when I left there. However, as you all know, Governor Quinn was not reelected, and since I was a political appointee, I was not reappointed. We had another gentleman that became the governor of the state, a Governor Rana. He wanted to take the board in a different direction, and he did not reappoint me. However, if somebody can think about it later, you may want to ask me what happened when Governor Rana put his board in place, and what happened to certain things that we benefited from, because I sat on what was called the Emerging Managers Committee. Emerging managers is a euphemism for African American women, so-called minorities, those who would not normally be given a chance to manage pension funds, which is a big deal in the state. One of the greatest roles I served in, though, was I was elected president of the Service Employees International Union for People of African Descent. These are all of the African Americans that are represented by SEIU. At that time, 30 to 40% of SEIU was African American, with leadership in various regions of the country, in the South, the Midwest, East, and northern part of the country. And by the way, I'm still serving as president emeritus of that organization, and we're going to be having our national convention next week. So I'm looking forward to that because we can still make a contribution. I also served as the co-chair of the educational task force that brought home rule to the village of Hazelcrest. If you can remember, ask me what home rule is and why it may or may not be important to local communities. There are arguments on both sides of what home rule is, because a lot of it involves raising finances for local government and how you finance local government. The next thing I'd like to do is, there is a politician out there that I am very impressed with, and you all might be too. Her name happens to be Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams, pay closely attention to Stacey Abrams. Stacey ran for governor of the state of Georgia. And if you follow that situation closely, the person that she was running against was also over the political process, the Secretary of State. So I wanted to, and I hope I don't bore you with this, but I after reading her book, I thought it was important that I read a couple of pages from her. Is that okay, Glo? Okay. As I mentioned, on November 16th last year, according to Stacey, I officially ended my bid to become the next governor of Georgia. Although election day was November the 6th, we gone into overtime due to the closeness of the vote and the irregularities in the process. Because that was the protocol, she had to give a concession speech. But as we go on, you'll see her view on it. But my life and this book are about knowing the rules, then deciding how they apply, or if we need to write our own rules. This is Stacey Abrams. She says here that a good government should be a tool that helps where it can and gets out of the way when it should. It must work for everyone, protect our investments, and defend the civil rights of all. She goes on to say, and I'm going to skip around a little bit, Georgia has the fastest growing ethnically diverse population, and by 2026 or so will be the first majority-minority state in the Deep South. That's a big deal. She goes on to say that my victory would also be a historic one. The election of the first black woman to serve as governor in the United States. In May of 2017, I became the first black woman to receive the gubernatorial nomination for a major party in American history. On November 6, 2018, I received more votes than any Democrat in Georgia history, outpacing President Barack Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. I learned later that our campaign tripled the turnout of Latinos and Asian Americans. More than double the youth participation. I received more votes from African Americans than the sum total of Democratic voters in 2014. My candidacy created a path to win a congressional seat and flip 16 legislative seats. I received the highest percentage of the white vote recorded in a generation. And it came within 1.4 percentage points of a man who ran the election and ran against me, both serving as contestant and referee. So on the night of November the 16th, I returned to my initial mission to do thousands of people I had along the campaign trail. Then, nothing is more important than the act of running for office than actually talking to voters, especially those people who are too often left out of the conversation about the future, When called upon to accept that the results of the vote would not be in my favor, I would not be getting victory, I accepted the math. But then to perform the traditional dance of concession, I vigorously declined. While I knew that, according to the law, I had to tell the fellow Georgians that our jointly imagined future would be delayed, I refused to play by the scripted part because the game had been rigged again. This analysis isn't new, nor is it news. For those of us on the outside, the quest for power is always rigged. Sometimes it's because we don't know how to gain entry, or because the winners get to play by a different set of rules. And just a little bit more. In elections, our nation has fought a lifelong battle about who gets to have say in the outcome and set the terms for the next battle. Race, gender, class has been constant markers of access, beginning with the Constitution. My election was no different. Poor communities found themselves without equipment for voting, including missing power cords and antiquated machines. Our voters arrived at their polling stations only to be turned away because they had been illegally purged or because the poll workers didn't have enough paper for extra ballots. Some stood in long lines for hours while their compatriots had to give up or go back to work, or rich families not being able to manage on their meager paychecks. This is how the game of elections is rigged. I'll skip around a little bit. There is one piece of this I really wanted you to hear. In my concession speech, most political folks expected me to turn a blind eye to the complaints and the outcome. They were looking for me to say that no compromise of our democracy had occurred. And most expected polite compromise in the language I used to call an end to the fight. But unfortunately for them, I had read my book. And I understood conceding the election would not be right. I admit the playing field had never been level. The reality is that the number of us enjoy a degree of privilege over others at various points. Yet knowing a truth does not make it correct. Right or wrong remain valid. Real constructs in the 2018 Georgia election crossed the line, and I said so. And I said so on national television. I held myself accountable as leaders must, even when the result would be snide comments, angry op-eds, or unreturned phone calls from former friends. This was a question of right and wrong. What's not right is giving credence to bad actions and thereby becoming complicit. That was true on November the 16th, and it will be the crucible for each challenge I face in my life. Every challenge will be a face in your life as well. There is still right and wrong, and it's important to distinguish between the two in every choice, in every hard moment of decision. Do we concede? Do we compromise? Or do we fight? These are the options. Concessions accepts the act as right and proper, and society's existence necessitates the act of compromise or bending our wants to the needs of others. Leadership is a constant search for the distinction between compromise, when compromise is an art of power, and when concession masks submission, or when the fight is on. I know this election demanded a moment to be compromising, to build a future without conceding my principles. I refuse to be gaslighted into throwing away my power, diminishing my voice, because I don't simply speak for myself. I had the hopes, the dreams, the demands of 1.9 million Georgians standing with me, and thousands more who have been unfairly, unlawfully silenced. And whether speaking up is about, and whether speaking up is about an unfair election or a flawed system of workplace promotion, the obligation remains the same. Once we recognize that wrong exists, we must fight to change it every day. That's from Stacey Abrams. I would encourage you to pay close attention to Ms. Abrams. Next, I want to talk to you about our association, particularly through the Coalition for Good Government, which is all of our organization. And I want to encourage you to participate. August 31, 2008 in Detroit, Michigan, our late leader Imam Mohammed, in an address titled "Having the Winning Spirit for Success," he said, "This country belongs to me. This country belongs to me too. I am one of the owners of the United States of America, and I don't care how big or small my share is. I'm going to recognize my share, and I'm going to be responsible for my share. I'm going to join with others, the little people, the poor people like me, and the rich persons, the makers and the shakers. I am a member of their club, whether they like it or not." The American Coalition for Good Government came out of a speech that was delivered by Imam Mohammed in 1995. The mission of the coalition is to contribute to the political climate for growth in American politics by enhancing leadership to change the circumstances that prevent us from realizing the good life. Our vision is to educate and empower American citizens in our local communities to participate in government. The ACGG believes in a winning spirit, a spirit that is conducive to producing the kind of thinking that will nurture and preserve the human spirit. According to the documents produced by the American Coalition of Good Government, we cite the preamble to the Constitution of the United States of America. You've heard it many times. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. We need to be involved in this process, brothers and sisters. The American Coalition for Good Government is concerned about all aspects of our life under the government of America. The sacredness of life, which I just mentioned. We believe all human beings are created by God equal, and life is created with the wisdom and balance and harmony. We hold life, human life, plant life, animal life created by God, we hold it sacred. Human dignity. The coalition believes that human dignity is important for all people and the rights that we come with as human beings. The coalition, and I'm going to speed my presentation up a little bit, is very much concerned about family life and health issues. Brother Wallace, you talked about that a little bit in your comments. We hold sacred the protection of family rights, that is, seeing the due rights of mothers and fathers, children and seniors are protected. That we have the right to home ownership, education, and health care. The coalition is concerned about the environment. We believe the human creation is not in conflict with the creation of Allah. We support the duty to preserve the earth and enhance the quality of life of future generations. We believe our economic growth and development does not have to be sacrificed for America to champion responsible legislation and politics, which will preserve our planet's natural resources for our children and our children's children. Of course, another issue that we're concerned about is education. We respect the right of the human intellect. We recognize that all human beings have been blessed with intelligence, and when encouraged, they will exercise that intelligence to make their own way in life. Some will find employment in the private sector. They will become bus drivers, school teachers, factory workers, etc. But many will strike out on their own to set their own course, seeking to start their own business, to become the employer as opposed to the employee. The coalition acknowledges that the education is the key opportunity and the real champion for all freedoms. The coalition is invested and concerned about community development. We've talked about that quite a bit today. We're concerned about economic justice. We welcome the development of coalitions with other community groups. We support a business environment that promotes a society that is not driven by the concerns of profits only, but also with the concerns and respect for human beings as well. We also acknowledge that the poor have dignity. All of these principles are right out of our holy book. We believe in property and business ownership. We support the right of every American to have a decent place to live. We value property ownership within our communities and support those who strive to remove undue burdens from property and businesses. Moving ahead, the coalition is concerned about community violence, victims' rights, criminal justice, crime prevention, prison reentry. In Florida just recently, most of you know there was a law passed that overturned a law that prohibited felonies, people with felonies the right to vote. And so in their last election process, felonies they gained their rights to vote, again in Florida. However, there are roadblocks being thrown in their way. The state legislature, controlled by Republicans, and I have nothing against Republicans, it's just these new group of Republicans, are trying to make them pay for court expenses and other expenses in order to have that right that was just voted on by the people of the state of Florida to give them. This is why politics is important. And in my final comments, I will talk about some of the roles we can play, not just me, but all of us. Even if you never run for office or do anything, all of us can play a role, particularly in our association. The coalition is concerned about the behavior of public officials. We support government policies that encourage private sector investment and innovation that create a pro-growth economic climate. We recommend that the public officials use their position to promote public good rather than selfishness. We require a degree of integrity from those we entrust with leadership within our neighborhoods. As an individual moves higher up the ladder of success, the moral responsibilities become greater and the sensitivities have to be bigger. The last point I'd like to make is on responsible freedoms. We encourage all religious leaders and social advocates to include responsible freedoms in their addresses. You're beginning to see that more and more, I believe, because the environment that we live in is dictating that. Otherwise, it may not happen, particularly from political figures. We believe that the freedom of religion is fundamental to the American way of life and that no government entity has the right to prohibit the free expression of this freedom. You'll see it, at least on the national level, where the chief executive of our national government is working against that freedom. That's important. That is unprecedented in my lifetime. We believe that ignorance is the main problem and the biggest problem is trust. Brothers and sisters, we have a lot of work to do. One of the, and I want to encourage you again to get involved in this association. One of our founding fathers, Ben Franklin, is quoted as saying, "Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn." Let me repeat that. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn. I think that is a truth. Brothers and sisters, here are some of the ideas for roles that each of us can participate in as we grow and fulfill the destiny that we are creating and living right now. And they are not in any particular order. And that is why I say that all of us can participate, even if you're sitting in the audience with a cell phone. We can participate and aid our association in trying to build our voice in the political process. First thing, one of the things that we all must do is determine what our interest is. And once determining what your interest is, educate yourself in that interest. And then maybe even run for office. Who knows? Attend community meetings, local board meetings, school board meetings, library board meetings, park district meetings, village or city council meetings. You don't have to attend them all, but once you determine what your interest is, if you're interested in what goes on in the library, attend the library board meeting. Find out what's going on in those meetings, who the players and the participants are, and at some point perhaps run for one of those offices. We had a brother in our community just recently. Who here lives in Homewood? Anybody live in Homewood? Homewood is right next door to us. The election that took place last Tuesday, April 2nd, there were 3 seats on the library board, but only 2 candidates. So a brother from our community decided he's going to write his name in as a candidate for that 3rd seat on the library board, and got about 15 votes and would have won the election. But he didn't know the process. The process is that you just can't go and sign your name and obtain one of these offices. You must go through a process in the system to declare yourself a candidate, get petitions signed, etc. This brother, it is a brother, would be on the library board now, which would be helpful to us. The other thing we must do as a community, and our Imam taught us this, we got to research candidates. We have a number of opinions about what people are doing politically, but our positions and our understanding may not be, and I'm not saying it is or not, but it may not be based on what the facts are. So we have to research candidates and research elected officials to find out what their policy positions are. It must be important to them that they know that we know what their positions are, because they want to talk about their positions. And when you research these positions, make sure they're factual, particularly if you're sharing those positions with other people. Because once you lose credibility in this arena, it's very difficult to get it back. You don't get it back in most cases. So you have to make sure that what you say is credible. Pay closer attention to the policy over personality. I think that's a big one, because right now we have a personality over the United States of America, and everybody's paying attention and responding to that personality. But what is that person's policy? What are they doing that we don't see? Policy over personality. We as a community, we need to have our own community candidates forums. We attend a number of forums and we're invited by others, but we don't do our own that I'm aware of. We need to bring some of these candidates in and have our own forum, have our own questions, have them fill out our own questionnaires about what their policies are on certain issues. And we must consider our own unity of purpose when we do that. If we as a community are all over the place, political figures will treat us as if we're all over the place. I believe that's our situation right now. We must consider fundraising for candidates and what we should ask of them that's in the best interest of our community. We're not talking about quid pro quo. We just want to know what your position is on issues that are important to us. For those of you who are involved in social media, consider following elected officials on Twitter or other forms of interaction. I don't know if you can follow them with the Cash app, but you can't follow them there. But we have to follow these people. I follow and communicate, believe it or not, with practically the whole freshman class of the U.S. Congress. They're a new group of people that were just elected. I want to follow them. I follow them on Twitter. I want to follow them to see what they're doing, what their positions are, how they're growing in the process. Are they true to what they ran for office on? Are they being corrupted by the system of politics? And I think it was someone said that politics, if you're not careful, will steal your soul from you. You have to be careful. You can enter the U.S. Congress as just a regular person, and over 10, 15, 20 years you come out a multimillionaire. Now, how does that happen with a publicly elected official? Your guess is as good as mine. And not only do I follow the entire freshman class on Twitter, I also follow Donald Trump, President Trump, on Twitter. Anybody in here doing that? We got a couple of hands going up. That's important. You know, I know many of us may not care for him, but it's important that we know where he's coming from. Not only do I follow him on Twitter, I respond to some of that nonsense that he puts out. You respond to it too, Sister Aisha? We respond to it. He's got something on there every day. He got something this morning about the Democrats wasting their time. There ain't no collusion. There's a witch hunt, all of that. And so I responded. I don't know exactly what I said. I said something to the effect of, the cover is off of you. We see you clearly. It doesn't mean anything to him probably. He doesn't have a heart for that. He may not even see his Twitter feeds. But we make the comment. Somebody might give him what you call it, a briefing on it. He might read that. And so, brothers and sisters, we have a lot of work to do. I want to encourage you to investigate the coalition, the American Coalition for Good Government. That's our association. And I must admit that I have been very hesitant of getting involved in the political process in my community. I ran for office twice, and I was elected twice. I served as mayor pro tem under a mayor, and many of you all have met. You met Mayor Donaldson. He came to our conventions. Is this being recorded?
Yeah, you want me to? I can stop it. I'll start back.
Well, I do want to make a comment that I don't want recorded.
Pause.